the Vermont Wood Pellet Company, who is shockingly going to be talking a little bit about how Vermonters can heat more cleanly and locally with wood pellets.
So, as he said, my name is Chris Brooks. I own the Vermont Wood Pellet Company. Cut my teeth early on selling wood pellets overseas out of Georgia, putting 10,000 tons strong in the belly of a ship, sending it over to Europe as a renewable resource for them. At the time, I was living up here, but doing that down there. I was encouraged to open a mill up here. When I opened the mill here, I did a little research. Found out what Vermont wants is not a 100,000 ton facility. They want a community scale facility, one that can work within the community, within the confines of the community, one that's renewable, one that doesn't overtax the resources in the local community. And so what we came up with is a heat local model. And that essentially is we located in an area that has 107,000 acres of forest cropland within a 30-mile radius of our mill. The mill itself is down just south of Rutland. And actually, this area was our second choice. We had worked with Acorn Energy Group up here to site a location up here. Anyway, so the mill, we built the mill in 2009. We've been operating it ever since then. The mill itself employs 24 people. For every one person that is employed in the mill, there are 4 people out in the woods working, cutting. The type of wood we use is pulp. So it's essentially wood that is taken out for improving the forest. Every one of those forest croplands has a management plan. And typically the management plan takes the weeds of the garden out, if you will, to let the better trees grow. We use the weeds. So it really doesn't have an impact on the forest other than to improve the forest. The local economic impact that we have, we spend about $3.5 million on the local economy. So that's spending money within a 30-mile radius of the mill. The mill itself produces enough energy to offset the need for 2.5 million gallons of fuel oil to flow in. So we are producing our own energy and taking care of ourselves. I get kind of a kick out of it because I'll have one of my loggers, like Wilbur Frederick, who pulls in with a load of logs, drops off the load of logs, pulls around to the other side of the mill, picks up 6 tons of pellets. Call me weird, but I think that's kind of cool. For me, that's goosebump kind of stuff. But it is a clean energy, it's a refined energy, and more importantly, it's an energy that is exactly the same cost as if you were on the pipeline, but it has an economic benefit to the local community and to local jobs. If you've got any questions, we can talk about it afterwards. Actually, I should talk about a little bit about the systems. The systems, imagine the pole model. They are, the wood pellets flow into a burn chamber. The burn chamber then heats whatever, whether it's forced air or whether it's water, hot water. A system itself can cost anywhere about $2,000. But the price versus if you're burning fuel oil right now is exactly 1/2 the cost for heat. Thank you.
Last but certainly not least, we've got Chuck Reiss, who's the owner of Reiss Building and Construction. He's going to be telling you a little bit about a particular home in Richmond, I believe it is, that they've been retrofitting actually to get to that place of being net zero.
Thanks for having me tonight. My company, Reiss Building and Renovation, actually builds new homes. And within the last decade, we also shifted into looking at existing homes and how we can take existing homes and make them as close to net zero as possible. The new homes is really easy to do. When you're starting from scratch, I haven't built a home that is not net zero in about 10, 15 years. So we've been doing this for a long time. It's just a matter of insulating correctly and applying the right technology. But the existing homes that you probably all live in right now, are a little bit more challenging. But they're very, very doable. I'm going to advocate an approach to your house if you're interested in this, or if you know somebody who is, that's a little more comprehensive, which involves actually starting with something called an energy audit. And I'm sure you've probably all heard of that, but that's where I would start, because your house is a system, and you need to understand how your house works and what the needs are of your particular house. And you can't really do that just by doing a quick walkthrough. When we do an audit, we go in, we do blow a door, we do a bunch of diagnostic tests to see what the house, the demand, heat demand of the house in particular is. And then we air seal it, weatherize it. So we take a more comprehensive approach, and because we're a construction company, we can also take care of issues other than energy that we run into. So I'd like to just walk you through one house that we did in Richmond and show you how we took this 100-year-old plus house and are about to make it very close to net zero. The owner actually works for a nonprofit. It's not somebody who has a lot of funds. So we actually went about it and phased it in for her. So we are now about to be in the third phase. This summer, we're going to actually complete the cycle for her close to net zero house. So this is the house that we're looking at here. It's in Richmond. It's got a 1,200 square foot house. It's built in 1907, 3 bedrooms, a little over 1,200 square feet. An old stone foundation, has a full attic. So full attics are kind of easy to attack in terms of weatherization. Next one. We also, when we did the initial estimate, we looked at it, and that roof faces true south. You'll notice some trees next to it, but maybe a couple of slides later, you'll notice that the trees are gone. So this house set itself up for renewable energy pretty well, just by orientation and angle of the roof. So those are the things that we assess when we go in addition to the diagnostics and the comprehensive approach of what the house energy demands are. Next. So infrared camera, is everybody familiar with what an infrared does? So we do a blow a door, which is we suck the air out of the house, and then we look and see where the air is coming in, and we can look with an infrared camera and see where that is. The darker portions of this infrared is colder, so we can pinpoint that and know, we have to close this up, tighten that up. The blow a door in general gives us an infiltration number for every house, and it's measured in CFM 50, which is the amount of cubic feet per minute we have to turn the fan up to get to a set pascals of negative 50. So we can do, that's standard for each house. So we can compare houses. We can say, wow, your house is really leaky, your house is okay. So, next. So in this particular house, the CFM 50 is 3,000. Now a really bad house might be close to 7,000. A really good house, the ones that we build now are 180 CFM for about this size square. So there's a huge range of air infiltration. So that's the number we work with. We work with that CFM 50, and we really want to make sure, see if we can get that down. That's where you start with your house. As Lee was talking about earlier, let's reduce the energy load to begin with by reducing that air infiltration number. This particular house was using about 650 gallons of oil a year, and the electric use was about 1,952 kilowatt hours a year. So BTU per square foot, that's another measure we could tell where your house fits in terms of efficiency. Anything over 40,000 BTUs per square foot, we kind of look at and say there's room for improvement. So this was a leaky house, a high energy use house. We do that from the diagnostics. Next. So once we have all this information, we look at the house for potential for renewable, then we can sort of chart a path to get you to net zero. And this is how we did it. So phase one, the air sealed and insulated. So this particular owner in her attic, we actually took out the old fiberglass. We air sealed everything inside with foam, and then we blew 2 feet of cellulose in, and we kind of got a little carried away with the hatch, but we put a little bit of insulation on the hatch. So we had some extra sheets. There are some fixtures that she did not want to change, so we have to make sure when you do this stuff, you're not creating fire hazards. So we had to air some of the fixtures that were there that she didn't want to change. So you can see the foam on the sides there, and we air seal that. So that's, we seal the top, and then next slide, we go to the basement and we seal the basement. So we found that there's high air infiltration coming from the attic, high air infiltration coming from the basement. So we use closed cell foam to the whole basement. Band joists, walls, everything is old stone foundation, pretty leaky. Next. And then we just went through and make sure we sealed everything up completely. You could see some of the studs out on one wall. So that's how we seal the basement and make that airtight. Next. So the cost of the phase one energy work, we insulated and sealed the basement. Here are the numbers for that. And insulated and air sealed the attic. She did have a sliding door that was pretty bad, so we replaced that. So in terms of this phase, it was a little under $10,000 to do this. She did get some state incentives through the home performance program. So that's the cost of phase one. We did that phase and then we waited. And when she had enough funds collected again, then we were going to start in on phase two next. So when we went back after this first phase, we looked at the air filtration numbers. So remember I was talking about that CFM 50, we reduced it quite a bit. The gallons, we were able to add a full year in between phase one and phase two, so we were able to see that we knocked quite a bit of the gallons, the fossil fuel she was using, just by doing weatherization insulation. And we also dropped her kilowatt hours per year. We did some swapped out some light bulbs. We worked on our boiler a little bit to make that more efficient. And our boiler comes on now, so we were able to knock down the actual kilowatt hours per year. Next. So then Betsy said, okay, let's move on to phase two. And we actually then put 24 solar world panels on her roof. She went with the extra panels that she didn't. Well, I'll explain how we came about the panels, but she put more panels than she actually needed because she's also interested in perhaps down the road getting an electric car and being able to charge her car. So, next. So that was the angle, there's the trees, and next picture, the trees are back. So, these are trees she wanted out because the house is kind of dark, so there may be, if your house is not situated so well, you may have to take some trees down. But if you don't want to take trees down and your house isn't situated, you can also do community solar, which is another option for you to actually buy into a system on somebody else's property that seems to be something that's happening quite often now. So I can talk more about that later.
Feel free to make pellets out of those trees.
Yeah. So the other thing we did, and I'm sorry the slide isn't very clear, but we actually, on this phase, also put in an air-to-air domestic hot water heat pump. That is a heat pump that's taking heat out of the ambient air inside the house and putting it into your hot water. And at the same time, dehumidifies. So we've been having a lot of fairly good luck putting these in the basement next to a boiler that's going on and actually sort of parasitically taking some of the heat from the boiler, putting it into the hot water, and then all summer long, you're taking that heat out of your basement, cooling your house. It's a great way to actually dehumidify the basement too. So we've had some real good luck, and this is an air-to-air exchange heat pump. So it's taking the air, running through the pump, extracting the heat, putting it in the water, so you're cooling the air down in the basement. So somewhat parasitic, and you have to be careful about that. And we have worked out ways where if you're using wood, you can actually duct some of your air down to this thing in the winter, and then shut it off in summer, and it just cools. And heats your water. Next. We've used this unit called the Stiebel Eltron, which is a unit that actually is very efficient, very good. This is a 80-gallon unit. You can get it in 50-gallon units too. Next thing. And they stand about 6 feet tall. Air goes in one side and out the other, and that's all it does. It's like a big refrigerator. It is got some noise to it, so you don't want to put it next to your bedroom, but in a basement application, it works pretty well. Next. So here's the cost of phase two. So the solar PV, 24 panels at 265 watts each. This is after incentives, the federal incentives and the state incentives. That's what the system costs. The air domestic hot water was about $3,500. We took out her old domestic hot water unit altogether and just replace it with this. So what we're doing here is we're setting the house up to be able to work off of solar for all its thermal needs. So the first phase of this was the thermal hot water. So, next. So then the last phase, which we're doing this summer, this spring, is moving, actually heating the interior space with heat pumps. In this house, we're probably going to put two 12,000 BTU Mitsubishi heat pumps, and that's what they look like. That's the condensers on the outside. And then on the inside, there's a head that actually, it's a single source. These are all single source used because their efficiency is a little bit higher. The multi-head source, we don't have that efficiencies yet. The reason we can use these is there's really two. The efficiencies have come way up in the last 10 years. So we can now heat down to minus 13 degrees. So in terms of heating your house, you can do it. So if you insulate and really make your house airtight, you can probably replace the heat with a couple of these units. And that has to be sized and figured out, and that's all part of the comprehensive approach that we take. Next slide. So this is a little bigger one. This is an 18,000 BTU, so they come in different sizes. They come 9, 12, 18. Next slide. And they stand off the house by a foot and a half or so, and we just bracket it right through the wall. It's pretty simple installation. The cost of these things are pretty low. Next slide. That's what they look like inside. They're single source, so like a Renai heater, but it's up higher in the wall. And that's the 18,000 BTU unit. These also cool. I'm not advocating that because we're not going to get to net zero if you use these for air conditioning. It's fine if you have a really bad week, in July when we all wish we could go somewhere else. You can probably turn these on with air conditioning the whole house. So, but if you use that all summer long, you're just using energy. You're not going to get to net zero. Next slide. So this is the projected kilowatt annual usage. So we have two heat pumps, and we project that each one of them is probably going to use about 2,200 kilowatt hours a year. The domestic hot water, we're thinking it's going to be about 1,000 kilowatt hours. And then the plug load for the house. So we needed 6,660 projected kilowatt hours for the year. Our projected solar annual production off the panels we put on, this is how we sort of size this whole thing, is a little over 7,000. So we actually have some available for electric car. So this house can be set up for heating itself and also having some additional electricity to charge the car. And this is really net zero. This is addressing some of the transportation issues too. Next. So the cost of phase 2 for 12,000 BTU pumps, BTU heat pumps, that's easy for me to say. 12,000 BTU an hour heat pumps, they're about $4,200 each installed. That's a rough, depending on where we got to put these and how easy the line sets together, but that's a rough figure you can use. So the total for this phase will be $400 for two. Next. So if we're looking at overall cost then phase 1, 2, and 3, again, this is being phased in over 5 years to accommodate budgets. We're looking at a little over $34,000 to do this system with incentives included. So she was spending about $2,800 a year. After we're finished with this, she would be spending probably only 10% of that. So we're very close to net zero in this house. So if you look at the numbers, you can sort of see what the payback is here. It's pretty good. And then after the 12 or 13 years where you've paid your initial investment back, then it's all yours. She will have cash flow if she took out the right loan or worked with the right bank. You would be cash positive from day one if you did all this. So the financial, I really said the financial incentive is there. And for the life of me, I'm not sure why people are not doing this full time, or why you're not doing it right now. So, next slide. So in terms of our future, we've saved about 250 gallons a year with this house. Just beyond after we've looked at saving energy. So putting all this together, I'm sorry, just with the weatherization part, you know, these are the kinds of gallons of oil and propane equivalents and natural gas equivalents we'll be saving, you know, if we did 80,000 homes, which is our target goal for the state. 80,000 homes is only a quarter of all the homes in the state. Next. So if we did conservation and renewables, then we're saving, you know, close to 650 gallons. These are the kinds of numbers that I think we need to be looking at when we start talking about are we doing natural gas pipeline or are we going to be doing this? This is our future. That gas line is just postponing the inevitable. You know, plus people who put, you know, money in capital invested into their systems, you know, the natural gas systems, they're not going to look again at this for another 20, 30 years. Because why would you change? Why would you change out something you just put in? It makes no sense. It makes no sense for us to be doing the pipeline when we could all be doing this. You know, if I can do it with a 100-year-old house in Richmond, we can do it with every one of your houses here. And I think it's just people are unaware that we're in the middle of a revolution right now. And that revolution is solar and heat pumps. And even Chap Smith, who I spoke to in Montpelier there, he was unaware